the strategy behind the increasingly frequent public policy pitches, and how should the Liberals respond? Let's bring in the front bench to talk about that. Former senior advisor to the Liberal Ontario governments of Dalton McGuinty and Kathleen Wynne. Dan Moulton is here. He's now a partner with Crestview Strategy. Next to him, that's Larissa Waller. She's the founder of Henley Strategies, also a former head of communications for Ontario's Conservative Premier Doug Ford. Here with me in studio, Kathleen Monk is former director of communications to the late Jack Layton. She's now the principal owner of Monk & Associates. And rounding us out tonight, Laura Stone is a Queen's Park reporter for the Globe and Mail. Hi, everybody.
Hey,
happy Tuesday. Larissa, I think it's Tuesday. Yeah. Larissa, I'll start with you. I think there's I was saying to you earlier on radio, the same thing. I see a very clear delineation between pre-by-election and post. And certainly for the last 6 months, the Conservatives have been unable to drive the news cycle the way they used to, let's say, a year ago. The last week has seen a real effort to be able to do that. What do you think is the impetus behind that?
Honestly, there's no secret sauce here. It is putting out policy and having a press conference and having the federal Liberals respond. This is happening at the same time that the Liberals, their communication frankly sucks. Their theory of communication, they're putting out too much stuff in one announcement. And so the Conservatives are doing a good job of driving the narrative, talking about things that are frankly very, very timely and things that people are worried about, right? Youth unemployment is up. Kids are going back to school. They didn't work during the summer, and so they don't know how they're going to pay for school this year. And then you have the Liberals are dumping all of their big announcements, and frankly, there's some good stuff in there. They're dumping it all on one day on a Friday afternoon. It's not hard to beat them at this communications game right now.
Kathleen, what are your thoughts? You talk about comms all the time. It has been interesting the last week to see some frequency and some drive for relevance that wasn't there prior to the by-election.
Yeah, I think that Mr. Poilievre is doing a lot of the right moves. He did what he needed to do. After the loss, he went to ground. He worked really hard, actually, in the summer to earn that by-election, right? He was pretty quiet. Canadians were kind of, tired of seeing him after the election of the last 2 years of his, incredible growth that he did have. And he did the work of the summer, and now he's surfacing. And he's benefiting from a few things. He's benefiting from, not only is he on topic, on point, immigration, crime, housing, the budget, right, and jobs. But he's also benefiting from his viral content that he puts out there. He's a veritable clip machine. I look as a former communications staffer at some of the clips that he's rolled out over the last week, the skinny man, fat man clip and a few others that really just are sticky, and they stick to media, and people listen and their ears perk up, frankly. And also he's benefiting from, a growing almost ecosystem of right-leaning online media that is helping him, including his own YouTube channel and platform, where he has incredible numbers in terms of audiences. So he is once again improving the strength that he has, the latent muscle that he hasn't used for the last few months, frankly, and he is flexing it, and his ability to actually shape the political discourse and narrative of this town. And he is making Carney respond, which must be infuriating for the Prime Minister, who actually, objectively, when you look at it, basically rescued this party over the last, 6 to 9 months, brought it from the flames that it was, and actually formed a government, a minority at that. But he isn't able to dominate with a message track the way that Pierre Poilievre has been so successful at.
And I think prior to the summer, it was interesting. They were, right? They made a number of announcements. They were the ones responding to the big moves from Donald Trump. But then things quieted over the summer. There was a lot of instability in the relationship with the U.S. that left an opening, it feels like, now at the end of the summer and the early start to the fall. Dan, I want to get your take on how the government is or isn't navigating this. I just want to first play a clip so that we give equal airtime to both the parties, to the Minister for Jobs, Patty Hajdu, because she actually had an announcement in Edmonton today. She was asked about the youth unemployment rate, which is something through various announcements Poilievre has been focused on. Let me play the answer that she provided.
Many economists say that youth are the canary in the coal mine. And as we see sectors threatened, as we see employers tighten up on hiring, often it is youth, and those that are the newest and entering their career, that are facing the hardest time to find that employment. Young people need on-the-job experiences. They need to gain, as many employers say, soft skills as well as the credentials that they carry after their post-secondary education. So this is something that we have to stay focused on.
So if one thing jumps out to me there, it's sort of similar to the response from the Prime Minister last week on temporary foreign workers, right? Like there's a logical case or argument to be presented, but it sort of neglects to address the emotional factor of a lot of that stuff. What is your take on how if the Liberals are prepared to deal with what we've seen over the last week and how much that will be a factor in the fall sitting?
Look, I think Canadians elected the government to deal with some of the big challenges the country is facing. Some of them are immediate and existential, like our trade relationship with the United States and how embedded we are and invested we are in that relationship versus global trading partners that we need to be increasingly turning to, or getting big things built, getting resources developed, getting big infrastructure projects approved and built in this country, cleaning up our fiscal situation and dealing with the budget. These are big challenges that they were elected to deal with. And I think throughout this summer, they've been focused on trying to advance some of those public policy initiatives and then deal with breaking crises, whether or not that is in the trade relationship or whether or not it's with challenges in certain federally regulated sectors with the unions, like the Air Canada strike this summer. Those are big things that they have been focused on trying to move forward. I think in this moment, it's difficult for opposition parties to break through, right? That is the challenge they've faced. And I think Pierre Poilievre has tried to cut through that noise, tried to focus in on the things that he is quite strong on. I think affordability is an issue that the Conservatives are stronger on and he is stronger on, and helps him try and speak to young voters. I'm a little more skeptical than my colleagues about how effective that's going to be, given all of the noise in the system, all of the attention and energy that's paid in our news media and in the information that Canadians consume to those other bigger global challenges. His ability to cut through is, I think, a little bit suspect right now. I don't know that we're seeing it. When Parliament resumes, I think he's going to have a platform again to try and continue to do that. The question is, who is the opponent he's fighting? You listen to Mr. Poilievre talk, it's as though he's trying to fight a different opponent. He's trying to fight some radical left liberal thing he keeps talking about, a boogeyman, a Justin Trudeau. That doesn't exist for him any longer. I think a lot of young Canadians, particularly young Canadian women, who Mr. Poilievre has struggled with, look at the data. They are seeing this government try to deal with some of those big problems that the country faces, taking a more pragmatic approach, a more moderate approach. And I think that is what's working, and that's what's resonating politically right now. Pierre Poilievre seems to be wanting to have a very different fight, and I don't think that fight's materializing for him in the way that it was the last few years.
I do, Laura, agree that Mark Carney is not Justin Trudeau. And I don't think that the federal Conservative leader has necessarily figured out what he needs to augment, if anything, to address that. Like, I take Dan's point on that. But I also think at the same time, like, it wasn't necessarily like objectively I can say they're breaking through. But last week, Cabinet was told by Leger, you were there, I were there, that people are moving on from those big existential issues that Dan rightly points out have dominated the news cycle because they're becoming accustomed to it. And we interviewed the vice president of Leger who talked to the prime minister that day, and he said, like, Canadians want to know what you're doing for them. Like, they want to know what is in this for you. And I imagine that has to be internalized at some point as well.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, Pierre Poilievre has been adept as opposition leader in kind of setting the agenda and the tone for the issues that Canadians care about. I mean, he was kind of the first one to talk about inflation, affordability. He took on the carbon tax. He took on the EV mandate, and he's trying to take credit for that. And I think he's trying to find the next big thing. And so I think that's why you've seen him out as Parliament is set to resume, trying to talk about these issues that he wants to tackle with Mark Carney. And while the policy ideas may not be so different than what we heard from the election campaign, I think times have changed somewhat. And you mentioned, Bashi, that the polling about, you know, the existential threat or the panic, the Trump panic of striking a deal has kind of passed, and people have maybe reluctantly accepted that we're in this muddy zone now with the U.S. administration where we may have to accept some sort of tariffs on sectors, and we probably aren't going to strike a deal, and no one really knows what's happening. And so there's kind of that less of that urgency than we saw potentially during the campaign, and people have moved on to pocketbook issues. But, you know, the Carney government is trying to tie all of their announcement and their measures about business to Canadians, you know, financial situations. And so I think they're trying to still make that link with what's happening with the U.S. administration, the full-scale rupture, as the Prime Minister says, to the economy, and how they need to fully change and adapt to that. And I think that will be their argument going forward. But I think you've seen from the hints from the Prime Minister, he's going to make some big announcements about housing. He's going to talk about bail reform, he said. And so I think those things that those pressing issues that Poilievre is trying to set the agenda on, I think will be addressed. But clearly the leader of the opposition is out there. He's kind of regained a bit of confidence since winning the by-election, and he's trying to set the tone before Parliament resumes next week.